Lupa will fairly annihilate your enemies, and in this video I'm going to tell you how to play, build, and use your Lupa the best, starting with her kit. Lupa is a fusion broadblade 5-star character who focuses on buffing her fusion damage teammates, as well as doing respectable personal damage herself. Her basic attacks are, for once, not actually that simple, so let's start explaining. Lupa's basic attacks and aerial attacks are just a string of attacks that are pretty normal. There is some stuff from where you can begin on the second basic attack, but that's not going to be relevant to Lupa's core rotation. What will be relevant, however, is Lupa's alternative heavy attacks. Whenever your Forte reaches 50, Lupa's heavy attack will be replaced, depending on how much of her second Forte she has. The first Forte is called Wolf Flame, and the second is called Wolf Faith, so keep that in mind before I explain it during the Forte circuit section. When you have 50 Wolf Flame, your heavy attack becomes Heavy Attack Wolf's Gnawing, which deals fusion damage and restores 1 point of Wolf Faith. And if you have 50 Wolf Flame and 1 Wolf Faith, instead of Wolf's Gnawing, you will be able to use Wolf's Claw. This will also generate an extra point of Wolf Faith, and you can cast it by pressing the normal attack after using either Wolf's Gnawing or Mid-Air Fire Strike. Speaking of which, Mid-Air Fire Strike will replace your third mid-air attack, assuming you have 50 Wolf Flame. It will consume stamina and deal fusion damage considered heavy attack damage. And much like Wolf's Gnawing, it will consume 50 Wolf Flame as well as regenerating 1 Wolf Faith. So as a bit of a summary, Fire Strike, which is the aerial, and Wolf's Gnawing can be cast when you have 50 Wolf Flame and will regenerate 1 point of Wolf Faith. If you still have 50 Wolf Flame after that, you're able to use Heavy Attack Wolf's Claw immediately after, giving you your second point of Wolf Faith. Got all that? Good. Now we move on to her skill. Her skill is relatively simple. It's a skill that you can cast twice, much like that of Carlotta or Fleur-de-Lis, where in the first attack she will throw her banner, and the second attack she will chase down the enemy. You're only going to be using this at the start of a Tower of Adversity or Whimpering Wastes run, where you do not have your intro skill available, so it's not really that important of a skill. What is important, however, is Lupa's Resonance Liberation. First, you will deal a tick of fusion damage, after which you will gain the Pack Hunt effect. Pack Hunt is essentially a stacking attack buff, much like Shorekeeper. It starts out at 6%, then it grows to 12% after one intro skill, and ultimately caps out at 18%. Additionally, when you are fighting a boss, you will deal 10% additional fusion damage bonus, which is increased to 20% if you're running a party consisting of 3 fusion characters. So if you are running a mono fusion team, you'll get 20% fusion damage bonus. Additionally, much like Shorekeeper's outro skill, Lupa will allow you to dodge out of a hit up to 3 times, as opposed to Shorekeeper's 5. But those are just the buffs. After the attack buff has been fully stacked, so after 2 intro skills, Lupa's next intro skill will be changed into an enhanced version called Nowhere to Run. I'll talk more about this ability later. Additionally, after using your Liberation, using a normal attack or a skill will cause Lupa to cast Foe Breaker. This consumes all Wolf Flame and Wolf Faith and allows you to enter the Burning Match Point state. While in Burning Match Point, you will be able to regenerate Forte 5 times as fast. So essentially, without this buff, your Forte generation will be incredibly slow. You're also not capable of using your skill while in Burning Match Point, so this is why we are not using it outside of opener rotations. So again, to summarize, gain fusion damage bonus on bosses, and gain an attack buff that gets stronger and stronger the more intro skills you use. And after using Resonance Liberation, you use your normal or skill to use Foe Breaker. It's relatively simple. Now it's time to talk about the Forte circuit. Lupa's Forte circuit has a lot of stuff in it, but it can be very easily simplified. First of all, Lupa gains 12% attack for 8 seconds after performing either her heavy attacks, her Liberation, her skill, or her Forte skill. So essentially consider this as a 12% attack buff. Now onto her Forte bars, which I briefly touched up upon before. Wolf Flame will have up to 100 points, which you're able to regenerate by casting normal attacks, aerial attacks, skill, or Resonance Liberation, which, as I talked about earlier, can be consumed by using your special aerial attack or your special heavy attacks. Then there is Wolf Faith. This can be obtained up to 2 times, and when you have 2 stacks of Wolf Faith, Lupa's Resonance skill becomes replaced by Dance with the Wolf, which gets strengthened when you are in the Burning Match Point state of her Resonance Liberation. Without the Burning Match Point buff, it's just a strong hit of fusion damage. But if you do have Burning Match Point, it will be enhanced, dealing even more damage, as well as allowing Lupa to stay on the field whenever you swap out to have her deal a sort of extra attack whenever any teammate uses a Resonance Liberation, which can be triggered up to 1 time. Now it's time to talk about her intro and outro skills. Her intro skill at base is pretty uninteresting. It just deals fusion damage, as well as allowing you to instantly start on your 3rd basic attack after using it. But what's important here is the enhanced intro skill, Nowhere to Run. This will deal a lot of fusion damage, which counts as Resonance Liberation damage bonus, as well as ending the Pack Hunt state, as well as the Glory state from her inherent skills. So essentially, much like Shorekeeper, this will trade off losing all your buffing for doing a crap load of damage. But unlike Shorekeeper's intro, this actually does good damage, so yeah, this is very worth it in my opinion. Then there's the outro skill. The next character you swap into after using Lupa's outro skill will get 20% fusion damage amplification and 25% basic attack damage amplification. This makes her very good with characters like Brant and Encore, who deal primarily fusion basic damage. Now to get into her inherent skills. The first one allows Lupa to have a special sprint state if she's sprinting for 2.5 seconds. But the real meat and potatoes comes in the second part. During Lupa's enhanced heavy attacks and enhanced aerial attack, she will now get extra interruption resistance, which is very convenient. But the second inherent skill is much more powerful. First, there is a little bit of a buff to the skill, which no one's really going to care about. But what is important is the fact that the Resonance Liberation now gets an additional effect, allowing characters to ignore 3% of fusion resistance on enemies, depending on how many fusion teammates there are. And if there's 3 fusion teammates, which would be a mono fusion team, this is increased by an additional 6%, which means that if you have a mono fusion team, you're able to ignore 15% of the enemy's fusion resistance. This is a really powerful effect, and makes Lupa particularly shine in mono fusion comps. If it isn't obvious, Lupa is very much designed to be the final piece of the Chongli and Brand team, but more about that in the team section. Alright, so with Lupa's entire kit covered, it's time to talk about her rotation. Her rotation will be as follows. Either if you have her intro skill, you want to use her intro skill. If you do not, simply use a resonance skill. After that, you want to immediately use your liberation, and then use either a basic attack or a skill to use Foe Breaker, after which you should be in the air. Then you use your first and second mid-air attacks, followed by mid-air attack Fire Strike, which you can very easily do by simply spamming the basic attack button. After that, you use heavy attack Wolf's Fang, which should be automatically cast if you have been spamming the base attack button. And now that you've used Fire Strike and Wolf's Fang, you should now have 2 Wolf Faith, after which you can use your Forte skill and swap out. With the rotation out of the way, it's time to talk about the level up priority. The most important thing to level is going to be your Liberation. It's where a large chunk of your damage is going to be situated, but alongside it, I would definitely level up her intro skill, as well as her Forte circuit. The Liberation, Intro, and Forte all have a relatively similar output, and I would not prioritize any one over the other. But if you had to, Liberation, then Intro, then Forte. But please try and level them as equally as possible. If you want to level the basic attack, you can go ahead, but it's not too important for Lupa's damage output. Now it's time to finally start talking about Lupa's build, starting with her weapons, by which the first mention is obviously going to be her signature, Devil Sword Dante. Oh, sorry, I mean Black Blade Malekith. Oh, I'm sorry, Wildfire Mark. It has a large base attack as well as crit damage on the substat. For its effect, it will give a permanent 12% attack, and whenever you use your intro skill or your liberation, you gain 24% liberation damage bonus, which will be refreshed upon dealing heavy attack damage. And when heavy attack damage is dealt, the entire team's fusion damage bonus is increased by 24%. This is an incredibly powerful weapon, because not only does it buff Lupa's personal damage by quite a large amount, it also has additional team utility, which we don't really see much in weapons. So if you really like Lupa, I think this weapon is definitely a recommend to get. Next up on the list are the 2 other 5-star limited Broadblades, being Ages of Harvest and Verdant Summit. Honestly, there's really not that much to say about them. The passives are kind of mediocre, but they are good crit sticks, so they do end up being Lupa's second and third best options. Then there is Lustrous Razor. Lustrous Razor has a very large amount of attack, as well as giving liberation damage bonus whenever you use your skill. However, Lupa doesn't use her skill that much, so you don't really get that many stacks. What you do get, however, is some sweet energy regen. so you are able to run less energy regen on your subsets, so it's definitely a good weapon. There is also the Battle Pass's Autumn Trace. It has crit rate in the substat, as well as giving you a very large amount of attack whenever you either use a basic attack or a heavy attack, which Lupa does plenty of in her rotation. So it is a pretty decent option for her. It's nowhere close to the 5-star weapons, but it is decent enough. If you don't have that, you're gonna want to go for the Waning Redshift, which will give you energy upon casting a resonant skill, as well as attack. Because you can only use a skill pretty late on in your rotation, you're not really going to have that good of an uptime on this weapon's effect. So sadly, it's not going to be that powerful on her, but it is pretty decent for lowering your energy requirements. And if you have none of that, your best bet will be Meditations of Mercy, which is the craftable weapon in Renacida. It's basically just an attack stick, there's really nothing much to say about it, but it would be your final bet. As you can see, Lupa's signature weapon is obviously her best in slot weapon, but for her personal damage, Ages of Harvest and Verdant Summit are not that far behind. However, they do lose out on the team utility, so I absolutely do think that the signature weapon is worth going for. Now it's time to talk about Echo sets. The first one obviously being Lupa's signature set, Flaming Clawprint. It gives fusion damage on the 2-piece, as well as giving a team-wide fusion damage bonus on the 5-piece, as well as liberation damage bonus. This is obviously tailor-made for Lupa, giving team-wide fusion damage bonus as well as both liberation and fusion bonus to Lupa herself. So obviously this would be the best in slot, not only for its supportive capability, but also because it has the highest damage output for Lupa herself. The primary echo on this would be Lioness of Glory. If you don't have the 5-piece Clawprint, Molten Rift I wouldn't really call worth using, because you have to use a skill before you use your liberation in order to even get the effect on most of your abilities, which slows down your rotation, and I personally don't consider that to be worth it. However, if you do decide to run it, just know that the best echo to run would be the Nightmare Inferno Rider, because it simply has a faster animation and it's faster to cancel. For your stats, you want to go for crit rate or crit damage on your 4 cost, and then damage percent and either damage percent or attack percent on your 3 costs. It is actually very close if you decide to go with Fusion Attack, and on Lupa's signature weapon, Attack is even not that far behind. So if you don't have a good fusion piece, that's completely fine. Just stick with Attack for now, and then on your 1 cost you're obviously gonna run Attack. Lupa does have some ER needs though. In a triple carry team like the triple fusion team with Chongli and Brandt, Lupa can get away with about 115% energy regen. But once you start introducing a character like Shorekeeper who has lower energy generation, you're going to be looking at around 130%. So please build your Lupa accordingly to make sure you can use her liberation. With echoes out of the way, it's time to build a team for your Lupa. And honestly, Lupa works well with almost every single fusion character in the entire game. Her best team is obviously going to be with Chongli and Brandt, where Lupa is buffing Brandt is buffing Chongli, and Chongli is buffing your Lupa. This team will have a constant damage output that is never wavering, making it perhaps the best team for all of Whimpering Wastes. And with its current damage output, it's absolutely annihilating tower adversity as well. So this is by far Lupa's best team. If you don't have the full combo though, don't be afraid to either run Shorekeeper or Verena in whichever slot you're missing. Using Lupa to buff your Chongli, or using Lupa to buff your DPS Brandt is still going to be powerful even without the final piece of the puzzle. And if it's Chongli specifically you're missing, you're able to replace Chongli with Chixia. Chixia has a relatively fast rotation, and because she's getting so many buffs for the Lupa and Brandt, her damage output will actually be pretty powerful as well, meaning this is actually going to be a pretty good team. An additional team you can run your Lupa in is with Encore. Encore primarily deals fusion basic attack damage, so Lupa's outro skill is basically perfect for her. And Lupa obviously has additional buffs, like Flaming Clawprint, her signature weapon, her attack buff, her fusion resistance ignore, etc. So using Lupa with your Encore is going to be a great idea nonetheless. It's honestly really hard to mess up on a Lupa team. Just pair up some fusion characters and make sure to rotate them in a way that makes sense. Even something like Encore Lupa and Mortefi is going to work completely fine, because Lupa just has such powerful buffing. So it's really hard to mess up on a Lupa team. And now it's finally time to get into Lupa's sequences. Her first sequence will cause the Resonance Liberation to generate an extra 10 Concerto energy, as well as increasing her crit rate by 20%. This is a pretty decent sequence, but it's nothing crazy. If you're looking for something crazy, go for her S2. This allows Lupa to give an additional 20% fusion damage bonus up to 2 times whenever some of her attacks are triggered, essentially giving you 100% uptime on a 40% fusion damage bonus buff. This is already a strong buff to Lupa herself, but it's going to be even better for your team, so this is looking like Lupa's best sequence. But if we're talking about personal damage, the best sequence will be her S3. This increases the multiplier of Lupa's enhanced intro skill to be incredibly powerful, essentially doubling its damage output. This is very good for Lupa's personal damage. It gives an additional buff to non-mono fusion teams, because now the fusion resistance ignore from her second inherent skill will be at 15% no matter how many fusion damage teammates there are. So this is actually one of Lupa's best sequences as well. Lupa's S4 is also relatively powerful, increasing the damage multiplier of the Forte skill by 125%. This is also going to be one of Lupa's best sequences for her own personal damage output. Sequence 5 is, however, disappointing, giving 15% Resonance Liberation damage bonus whenever Lupa uses her intro skill. This is only for herself and only lasts 10 seconds, so it's not really going to be that good. The 6th sequence, however, makes up for this. Lupa will now be able to ignore 30% of enemy defense whenever using her Forte skill, her Liberation, or her enhanced intro skill. These are her biggest hits of damage, so giving them 30% defense ignore is very powerful. Additionally, whenever you use the second stage of your skill, Lupa will restore 100 Wolf Flame. This essentially allows her to get 2 extra Wolf Faith stacks to get another Forte skill in. You would have to use these before the Liberation, however, because using your Liberation would cause you to use Foebreaker, which gets rid of all Wolf Flame. You also no longer need the Burning Match Point state in order to have Lupa's Forte skill be enhanced, so this means you're able to get 2 enhanced Lupa Forte skills in. And then for the final effect, Lupa's enhanced intro skill will no longer remove all stacks of Pack Hunt and Glory, which causes you to have 100% uptime on the most powerful versions of these buffs, which is actually a pretty nice effect if we are talking about team-wide damage. But primarily Lupa's, because instead of now being eternally stuck at 6% attack, she gets the benefit from the full 18%. This is, in my opinion, a pretty good sequence lineup. So if you want to get Lupa sequences, hey, be my guest. I'd say it's worth it if you really like her as a character. But those are just my thoughts on Lupa. Let me know what you think about her in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Additionally, if you have any questions, join my Discord. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask any questions, there's a pretty good chance I'll answer. Additionally, if you want to see more of me as a person, be sure to check out my second channel, which is also linked in the description. I'm mainly covering Punishing Grey Raven, but I mainly just make videos about whatever I want to. But that'll be all from me. Peace.